In the 104th minute of extra time in the 2006 World Cup final, the Spider-Man of football, Gianluigi Buffon, denied a thunderous header from one of the greatest players in the history of the game. That header, truly unbelievable, left people stunned that his former teammate could produce such a moment of brilliance. 8 years earlier, he had scored both goals with his head to bring the World Cup title to his team, and yet this time, he could do nothing against a formidable Spider-Man. But even Gianluigi Buffon could not have imagined that this decisive save, the final pivotal moment of the match, would secure victory for his team while creating tragedy for that captain in the closing minutes of his career. That man was Zinedine Zidane. If his life were to be called a movie, then surely the World Cup chapters would be the most dramatic episodes, when he experienced joy, tears, and even fury. To say that Zinedine Zidane is not one of the greatest players ever to wear the French shirt would leave one wondering who else could possibly stand in first place. Wearing the colors of a nation might seem irrelevant to Zizou, yet it was a question that had truly appeared in his past. Zidane was born in Marseille. He was of Algerian descent. His parents had immigrated to France 2 decades before his birth. He grew up in a tough neighborhood, notorious for its high crime rates and unemployment. His family, with his parents and 4 sisters, was where he was born, raised, and brought into this world. It was they who led him to football, making him one of the greatest players of all time, and it was also his family that played a role in shaping the final chapter of his career. A very special ending, one that no one could ever forget. And he proved to Newcastle United, the noisy club from England, that they were wrong not to sign him back in 1996. Yet Newcastle, too, had their reasons for that decision. But for Algeria, a small African country, rejecting him was perhaps one of the greatest mistakes in the history of its football. The reason given was hard to accept. Algeria refused Zidane because he was not fast enough. How contradictory that was, for Zidane was one of the rare God-given talents who had caught the eyes of scouts. He possessed everything they were looking for. In a multicultural country like France, it was clear their sporting policies were open to many athletes who did not carry pure French blood. Zinedine Zidane, though not of French blood, devoted his entire life to this country. That fact, combined with his talent, meant that the nation of the Hexagon had no reason not to welcome him. On French soil in 1998, Zidane introduced himself to the whole world, and it was here that his life was completely changed, elevating his name to a new height. Before the tournament began, the host nation had been criticized by the press for their mediocre performances. Doubts about Zidane's partnership with Yuri Djorkaeff were among the issues sparking debate. Yet Zidane proved that, even without pure French blood, the French people could put their trust in him. At the historic inauguration of the Stade de France, on January 28th in Saint-Denis, Zidane scored the very first goal at the stadium. That goal was later mentioned by the President of the French Republic at the time in a letter of thanks and tribute after the French team was crowned world champions in 1998, as if it was a guarantee of the victory that had already been destined for the nation on home soil. Zidane's World Cup journey began in such a special way. It was July 12, 1998, when France faced South Africa at the Velodrome in Marseille, the very city where Zidane was born and raised. He was by no means invisible in that match, and in fact, it was the beginning of a fairy tale as beautiful as a dream. From a corner kick, Zidane delivered the decisive pass for Christophe Dugarry to head the ball into the net. Yet the way Zidane wrote the opening chapter of his World Cup story was no less special than the way he would later close it. He earned himself a red card in his very first World Cup, true to the fiery character of this man. In the 4-0 victory over Saudi Arabia, Zidane, with his class, clearly stood out against an Asian side. But that was not what people remembered. All the attention turned instead to the red card he received in the second half. Zidane had a violent clash with Fuad Amin. That red card meant he was suspended for the third group stage match against Denmark and the round of 16 match against Paraguay. France's first 4 victories had very little of Zidane's imprint, but Zidane's return in the quarterfinal against Italy changed everything people thought about him. Facing many of his Juventus teammates, Zidane showed no fear. France and Italy were both European powerhouses, and so the match went all the way to a nerve-wracking penalty shootout. On the spot, Zinedine Zidane confidently and accurately converted his kick, helping France into the semifinals against Croatia. The semifinal bore the mark of a player from Italy, but it was not Zidane. Lilian Thuram scored both goals to deliver a 2-1 victory for France over Croatia. And then came the final. This was truly Zinedine Zidane's stage, for he was the star of the big occasions. On July 12, 1998, Zizou made history for himself and for French football. Zidane scored twice in France's emphatic 3-0 win in the final. Both goals came from corner kicks taken by Emmanuel Petit and Yuri Djorkaeff. It was Zidane who lifted France to the pinnacle of world football, raising the World Cup trophy on home soil. The French revered him at the highest level, almost as though he were the leader of the nation. His face was projected onto the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, as crowds chanted the slogan, "President Zizou." Remarkably, this did not upset France's actual president, Jacques Chirac. Zidane was among the rare names mentioned in Chirac's victory speech, alongside Captain Didier Deschamps and coach Aimé Jacquet. In his speech, Jacques Chirac wrote, "By scoring the first goal in the history of the Stade de France that day, Zidane ensured for France a world title that seemed destined from the start." He also wrote, "At the end of the qualifiers, Zidane said we were doing well and that we could achieve something great. And we did. All of you kept your promise. You completed a marvelous adventure. You gave us a wonderful lesson, beautiful in its courage, pride, perseverance, and solidarity." The French worshipped Zidane as though he were a true son of their land. Presidents of France, no matter their term, always spoke of him with the kindest words. Who could have believed that just 4 years earlier, France had failed to even qualify for the 1994 World Cup, and now they stood atop the world. It was no surprise that people revered him as though he were a religion. At the end of 1998, Zidane won the Ballon d'Or from France football. His career soared to heights he himself may never have imagined. But every book must have its stormy chapters, and Zidane was not spared the ups and downs of life. In 2002, France entered the tournament as the defending champions and favorites. With that status, people expected them to successfully defend their crown. Zidane, however, suffered an injury just before the World Cup began. In the first 2 group stage matches, France lost their biggest star and played poorly, a 0-1 defeat to Senegal in the opener and a 0-0 draw against Uruguay in the next game. Even though Zidane forced himself onto the pitch, playing through the pain in hopes of helping France beat Denmark and sneak through to the round of 16, he could not save a French team in disarray. They lost to Denmark and were eliminated at the group stage. The humiliation was described by the press as a disaster. Several players announced their retirement from international football. Zidane, having barely played due to injury, escaped the harshest criticism. After Euro 2004, Zidane made a shocking decision. He announced his retirement from international football. On August 12, 2004, Zinedine Zidane declared the end of his national team career, saying, "I think that at some point you have to know when to stop." So, Was this really the final chapter of Zidane in the blue shirt of the French national team? A chapter too lackluster, one that did not resemble him at all. In music, when a piece comes to an end, sometimes a coda appears, meaning a part of the melody must be repeated in order to truly conclude. And the final chapter of Zinedine Zidane's World Cup story felt as if a coda had been placed within it. On August 3, 2005, nearly a year after leaving the French team, Zinedine Zidane announced that he would return from retirement. He rejoined Les Bleus, once more aiming for the World Cup. In this last dance, Zidane gave everything he had to France at the 2006 World Cup, even though the team had shown little promise beforehand. The coda in this symphony made the final act mirror his very first World Cup. The first two matches left little mark, and Zidane was suspended for the third group stage match after collecting 2 yellow cards. The difference was that this time he played in the round of 16, and not until his third World Cup did he feature in a knockout stage game. Facing Spain, he produced a moment of brilliance, a solo run, finished with a stoppage-time goal that sealed a 3-1 victory and sent France into the quarterfinals. On July 1, 2006, in the clash with Ronaldinho's Brazil, Zidane delivered one of the finest performances of his international career. With dazzling dribbles that unsettled the Brazilians, he orchestrated the game and provided the decisive free kick assist for Thierry Henry to score the only goal. That display earned Zidane FIFA's Man of the Match award. In the semi-final against Portugal, he converted a penalty in the 33rd minute, sending France into only their second World Cup final in history. Carrying the hope of a second world title, no one could have foreseen that his story would end in tragedy, with a red card echoing once again the coda. Once more, Zidane scored in a World Cup final, converting a penalty past Gianluigi Buffon. If only Zidane could have done it again just once more, as he had 8 years earlier. But he could not. Not today, not now, not after everything he had already given. Those were the words of French broadcaster TF1 after Zidane's thunderous header was stopped by Buffon. The man who had scored 2 headers in the 1998 final was now denied. Buffon was the one who kept Zidane from touching the trophy, and thus the tragedy of Zidane's final chapter began. He had started his World Cup career with a red card and ended it with a red card, a cruel symmetry. Zidane suddenly unleashed a vicious headbutt into the chest of defender Marco Materazzi. The French captain was sent off with a straight red card. The final ended 1-1, and France were defeated by the Azzurri in a nerve-wracking penalty shootout. This was the last match of Zinedine Zidane's illustrious career. In an interview with CNN and TF1, Zidane expressed his wish to apologize to the millions of children who may have seen the incident, but he also stood firm. If I regret this gesture, that would mean Materazzi was right. Later, Zidane revealed that Materazzi had insulted his family, specifically his beloved sister. As a man who valued family above life itself, Zidane could not contain his anger. Family was what made Zidane's career glorious, and it was also family that shaped the tragic ending of his career. The way Zidane began was extraordinary, and the way he ended was extraordinary too. And it was precisely these extraordinary things that built the great legacy of Les Bleus.
31 goals in 108 appearances for the French national team from midfield are enough to tell of Zidane's completeness as a player. Ahead of him, had he remained with the blue shirt, he might have added more titles. But in the new role awaiting him, that of a brilliant coach,